In any life, we have highs and lows, light and dark, wins and losses. What happens when we encounter that moment in time when what happens next could change everything? Join us as we step into another person's inspirational moment and see how we can connect their experience to ours. This is Greg Stevens, and you're listening to A Shot of Inspiration. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of A Shot of Inspiration. I'm Greg Stevens, your host, and as always, we have our color commentator, Finley, with us, and she'll be leaving after we do the introductions. Today's guest is someone who I met in Palm Springs at a board meeting and didn't get to know too well at the meeting, but then we ended up spending about an hour together at the airport waiting for flights next to each other. And our guest is Dr. Chris Phelps. And Chris is a practicing dentist, and he's also a serial entrepreneur. And he has a true entrepreneurial spirit. You'll get to hear a lot of that as we're talking. And he is the US CEO of the Cialdini Institute. He's going to tell us a little about that. And I'd like to hear about some of your businesses, how you got started in being an entrepreneur from actually being a dentist, and kind of the journey you took. So, Chris, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate you having me on, and I love seeing Finley there. Reminds me of my English pointers I had when I was growing up.
That's great. Yeah, she's a lot of fun to have on, but she's a distraction once we get started. So I'm going to go and put her back in the waiting room, and we'll get started.
Yeah, I suddenly have a desire to chew on something. I don't know why.
Exactly. She's enjoying that. That's the
Yeah.
only way I can get her to calm down right now. We've got her going to puppy school, and they're really training us.
Nice.
But now, Chris, you live in North Carolina. What part of North Carolina?
Yeah, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Charlotte. I love going there. My wife and I have been there several times. We met at the boardroom, got to know you a little there. And then when we got to the airport, you were telling me about the Cialdini Institute, what you do with them. Kind of walk us through how you made the transition from dentistry into working with the Cialdini Institute.
Yeah, that's a great question. It all started many moons ago, as they say. When I got out of dental school in 2003, I had a mindset of growth for growth's sake. So my plan was just build as many offices as I could in Charlotte. And we had a phenomenal start. I joined my wife's dentist, who'd been her dentist in Charlotte since she was 14. So we moved back there. I was from an area called Greensboro, North Carolina, not too far away, but Charlotte was the bigger city and definitely more attractive to me than the smaller place I grew up in. And my original partner, Tom Grimes, he was really good about letting me spend his money in those early days on my marketing ideas to get myself opportunities as a new dentist in his practice. Because prior to me being there, he had 3 or 4 other doctors come in as associates, but none of them ever worked out because of that. And it was that new client number and consistent number coming in each month was really the root cause. He didn't realize that at the time. But because of those efforts, we were able to grow that business 10 times and from 1 location to 4 over a 7-year period. So phenomenal growth during that window. But when I reached this pinnacle in my mind where I thought I was successful, my second son had been born and my wife was having some postpartum issues and really needed me to be home to be of help. And I realized because I was still doing clinical dentistry 5 days a week on my patients, but still running all the operations and making the decisions for the 4 practices because they were spread out all over town and doing the marketing for those. Yeah, my cup hath runneth over. And so I realized in that moment that while people thought I was successful, I had trapped myself in my own business, in essence. And that was not a fun realization to come to. I hope nobody ever has that realization, but there I was. And so I knew I had to make dramatic changes to change that. And so I've been going to an entrepreneur program at that time with a guy named Dan Sullivan, a strategic coach. And really, they asked some key questions to me at this time that made me realize I was trapped and then helped me realize that I needed a new plan. And so I created a plan to get myself out of this hole over a 3-year period. But to do that, I had to buy back my time, as Dan likes to say. So I sold my 2 best offices, so the highest producing, least debt offices, for revenue, so profit, and gave those to some partners that we had along the way. And Grimes and I, the original partner, we took over the 2 worst practices. and just signed over the debt on those. So we got some cash because I had to make it a no risk situation for the other partners. And we took on the risky ones. And mostly because I felt like if I could get back to doing it my way, then I could do more with the two. So I was changing my mindset to maximizing the capacity of what I had versus growth for growth's sake. So I felt like I could do more with those two than when I had the four. But I found myself constantly butting up against a wall because something magical happens when you take over your two worst practices. Problems that you were letting go and ignoring or procrastinating in your mind that were small little fires are suddenly like a forest fire you're engulfed in.
Right,
Right.
right.
Serious problems that had to be addressed. And one of those offices was costing me 70,000 a month in expense, but only collecting 35,000 a month in revenue. You can only write that check so many times, a few months in a row where you're like, holy crap, this is not good. This cannot be procrastinated on anymore. We got to do something about it. But my problem was, and your brain is not helpful, right? If it doesn't feel like it understands the root cause of a problem, and if it doesn't feel like it has the capabilities to solve the problem, that's the two things it does to help you. It ignores the problem or it procrastinates.
Right. Right.
But so now I see it, but it wasn't the capabilities. I felt like I could solve them. I couldn't put my finger on the root cause. Okay. Why is it my patients at these two practices weren't coming back for treatment when they obviously needed it? And it was going to cost them more time, money, and pain by not doing anything today and putting it off. Why is it my team that I kept having to micromanage them? Because I would bounce back between the two offices 2 days each. So why was it when the cat was away, the mice would play? Why do I have to keep telling them to do their job? Why don't they just do their job? These associate doctors that work for me, why am I paying for them to go get this education, continue education, and they're not coming back and using it? They're not applying new services for their patients and new revenue streams like they could. And so all these little fires going on, but I couldn't put my finger on the root cause of why. And then one of my friends from Coach invited me to a business conference, and the keynote speaker was none other than Dr. Robert Cialdini, who wrote that pioneer book, Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion, 40 years ago. There's a ton of books on your shelf back there. Many of those, I think, are yours. But think about that. How many books? What if we were sitting here 40 years ago today and somebody said how impactful your book still was to them, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's impressive that today, 40 years later, Warren Buffett still says that's his number one book on communication. It's actually never been more relevant and important than it is today, even past when it was written. So he talked about at the time his 6 principles of persuasion. Now we have 7, but these 6 ones. And to me, there was one of them that was my light bulb. And I was like, yes, that sucker is the root cause behind all these problems.
You knew it when you heard it.
I knew it when I heard it. That was like, oh, hallelujah. It's like the skies opened up. Oh. And that's what I guess in Buddha or somebody said that when the student is ready, the master will appear. And finally, I was like, yes, this guy knows what he's talking about. I got to seek him out. So I sought him out in Arizona, where once a year in the summer, they would do a 2-day persuasion training where you could dive deeper than what's in these books. And so I went and learned. I found out they had a certification so you could train with him directly. Somehow thousands applied. They picked me as one of their people that got to train with him. So I spent over a year training with him and his lead expert, Dr. Greg Neidert, basically studying more behavioral science studies than I care to admit. But then was able to take that education and go back to my practices as my laboratory and experiment.
Yeah.
Because this stuff was based in science and studies, I thought if it worked over there, maybe it'll work for me over here. So let me try it. And sure enough, I got the results. And literally 3 years later, yeah, I mean,
you got to apply it. You can't just know it. That's one of the things. So often I run into people, they know something, they learned it, but they don't apply it.
Yes.
And like you said, it's a laboratory.
It is, man. And that was always a big struggle for me. I'd hear a great concept, but if I didn't understand what to do with it, it would just piss me off, right? So kind of like a dog with a bone, I had these concepts and I was like, what do I do with these things? I got to do something with them. And so I spent years applying them and refining them and perfecting those systems. But of course, the result was each of those 2 practices had $1 million revenue growth. So each 3 years in a row. And those years, that was 2009, 2010, and 2011. So in what most people would call an uncertain economic situation because of that housing crisis, and people had tightened up their spending and whatnot, much like what we're experiencing today, right? And in fact, when more dental practices went bankrupt during that 3-year period of time than in the history of dentistry, we were able to succeed in spite of the economy and the mindset of the consumer out there. So what it really showed me at its core was that I was making my strategies on the excuses people gave me after no. You're too expensive. My insurance doesn't cover it. Okay.
Right.
People will rationalize anything once they've already decided.
Yeah.
But what I didn't understand was it was these principles, if when present, that was actually what people were making their decision based off of. But because they hit you subconsciously, nobody knew. So when I made my strategies around the principles and what people actually used to decide, suddenly I got a better result and outcome. So early on, I drank the Kool-Aid, if you will,
Yeah.
of influence and how to leverage that ethically in my businesses, and then built other dental support businesses on top of that. So built a dental consulting business on teaching persuasion and dentistry. And last year at the 40th anniversary party, Dr. Cialdini came up to me afterwards and asked me, given my experience with startups and turnarounds of companies, if I would step in and help with the Cialdini Institute, which is his legacy project.
Awesome. That's awesome. So tell me what the Cialdini Institute does. Walk me through what you do with them. Do you actually train? You run the business? What are you actually doing with the organization?
Yeah, so right now I'm in charge of building the US division. We're a global company, of course. We have a global CEO because his name is recognized worldwide. So, in essence, as a whole, we do, of course, trainings. In the past, you had to hire a trainer like me to come do this 2-day training. Now you can get the information and the training from Cialdini directly through 10 hours of video content that he's put together. And it's on demand, so people can take their leisure and walk through it as they desire, whatever pace they need to go at. We have a train the trainer program, right? So we're looking for people inside organizations who do training that want to be a part of our group, and also those that are coaches and consultants in other industries. So licensing, basically like a 2.0 version of what I used to do with trainings. Okay. So that we can also spread the message of influence and persuasion out there. And then we're working on building a mastermind for, just like you said earlier, knowing this stuff is one thing, but not understanding what to do with it is a totally different problem. So we're building a mastermind community built around application and to help people in their specific situations figure out, what do I do with this stuff?
Yeah, that's great. So what is your target market? Is it business owners? Is it entrepreneurs? Is it dentists? What specifically have you zeroed in on?
Yeah, it's challenging for us because our target market is anyone who interacts with people.
That's the problem I've had, because communication, it's like everyone can use it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, of course, anybody directly involved with sales, salespeople, marketing, but also anyone indirectly involved with sales that still has an impact. HR people, managers,
Yeah.
business owners. There's so many opportunities to influence and persuade people in other businesses and other industries. Everybody's trying to influence and persuade you. So why not turn it back on them?
Exactly. And I think influence is one of the most powerful things we have if we understand it. Otherwise, we have no power around it. Typically, we just go with the wind, I found.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It gives you a lot of insight in why people do what they do, and which then helps you make your strategies on what you're going to do next.
Yeah. Can you give us one idea of someone who's already made a psychological decision? How do you move and influence that? Let's say someone doesn't want to come back. They say, I don't have the money. They've already made that decision. Give me an example of one time you've used this, that so our audience can understand the bridge there.
Yeah. So one of my colleagues in the UK was involved with a company down in South America, and it was someone who owned a chain of McDonald's franchises, and they were testing this idea of social proof, meaning we often look to the evidence of what others are doing or have done to show us what we should be doing. And in certain restaurants with a dessert called the McFlurry, they would highlight that this chocolate McFlurry was the most popular of the three choices. And in a different group of restaurants, it'd be the caramel McFlurry had the most popular sticker. And in the third group of restaurants, it'd be the strawberry McFlurry said most popular. So all they did was just highlight that this is what everybody else or the majority had chosen prior, to see would that have any influence on the buying habits of the consumers when it came to desserts. As you can imagine, the increase in sales of those that bought that specific McFlurry, okay, was over 40%, okay, increase. What's more is it led to over a 50% increase in desserts overall. Right. Meaning not only did they sell more of the thing in question that was popular, they sold more of every other kind of dessert as a category. Because maybe you don't like the strawberry McFlurry, But now you get me thinking about a McFlurry, so I'll take the chocolate or I'll take the apple pie or whatever, right?
Something. Right.
So highlighting the social proof evidence of what others had done automatically significantly increased what others did moving forward. Now contrast that with a similar study where they did the same thing with the Big Mac versus the quarter pounder with cheese. So what do you think happened in sales when the Big Mac was the most popular versus stores when they said the quarter pounder with cheese?
From what you've said, I would think both of them raised in movement.
You would think significant movement in both, right?
Yes.
There was actually no change in sales in either one.
So why is that?
It hits to the heart of what influence and persuasion is all about. Meaning, think about this. Like if I go into a McDonald's, I'm a quarter pounder with cheese guy.
Right.
I'm already certain I know what I'm going to get there. There's no questions or doubt in my mind. Okay. No amount of influence is going to get me to change to a Big Mac, right? Because I'm a quarter pounder with cheese guy. So when you're already certain about a decision, maybe you've already had past experience. So let's say I've touched a red hot stovetop before and burned myself.
Right.
That's experience, right? And so if I see a red hot stovetop, I don't care what principle you put in front of me, you're not influencing me to touch it. Right. So it goes back to, is the person already certain or not? If they are, it's not easy to open that door back up.
Got you.
Not impossible, but it's not easy. Okay.
Gotcha.
The stage is set for a no automatic. But for most people, if they're coming into the situation unsure, now you got a chance to influence and persuade.
Gotcha. So there's got to be an opening there to make it much easier.
Yes.
Right. How do you find that opening?
Hopefully you leverage these other principles before they get in front of you and when they get in front of you to try to wedge that door, keep that door open.
Okay.
So a big one for me is like the mindset the person's in, right? When you get to a meeting with somebody virtually in person, they're all coming into the situation with a mindset already established, right? It's already there. They're coming into it. Like right before this podcast, I was doing something else. So I'm coming in with that thing I was just thinking about. And it's still, we're talking, but it's still lingering there. Backdrop. So what most people don't understand is if you don't change that person's mindset, if you don't refocus it back on the topic at hand and really what they value about the topic at hand, then they're still in that other mindset. And that mindset most of the times is going to be competing with what you want to talk about, or at a minimum, distracting them from what you want to talk about.
Yeah.
Either way, the door to yes is shut.
Okay? Yeah. And that's why so many people have problems going from meeting to meeting. There's only so much the human brain can take in, and you're scattered by the end of the day. And all I've done is meetings, don't know what to do next. Yeah.
That mindset shift, most of the studies show, takes a lot of mental energy.
Oh, it does. Yeah.
And some of us have more in the gas tank to accommodate that. Others of us don't. But either way, you do it enough, it's draining no matter what.
Oh, yeah. That's why my wife was saying the other day, you don't have to get up at 4:15. I was like, I do. I got to get a head start because everyone else is faster. I've got to get where I need to be because life moves so fast now. I've got so many things coming at me. I need that time so I can focus and work on that and get my mind right. Yeah. I want to shift the gears a little and talk a little about the businesses you have already created and possibly anything you're looking for. Your mind, I loved when we were in the airport. You see a problem and you try to find a way to fix it. And from our conversation, you're great at it. So let's hear about some of the businesses you have begun and then maybe some of the things you're looking at in the future, if you can.
I think you asked me earlier, like my entrepreneurial roots, right? History. And truly, me growing up, neither one of my parents were entrepreneurs. They were employees. I didn't really have a good entrepreneur model that was around me growing up. So I didn't have a rich dad, right, so to speak, to guide me down a path. I just randomly made the decision to be a dentist in 7th grade because a friend of mine invited me to a Future Dentists of America club meeting because his mom signed him up for it and he didn't want to go by himself. So he asked me to come with him, and I'm the one that falls in love with it. So I just thought my purpose was from that aspect, all right, I'll be an entrepreneur and then I'll own my own dental practice, but I just like doing the dentistry side of things. But the first entrepreneurial thing that came out was when I was in dental school. And my wife will tell you, because she was present in both situations, me as an undergraduate student in college and me as a dental school student was a tale of two cities. Okay. Me, undergrad, not as motivated as I should be, doing the bare minimum to get the cram for the A. whatever the shortcut was, because to me, it was a hoop to jump through to get to where I really wanted to go. And that lack of motivation was hard because of that. I hate doing stuff that there's no real purpose. I'm never going to use this stuff. It's just a hoop. But dental school, I was like, all right, this is the show. This is what I've been wanting to do since seventh grade. I got to be an expert. But I went from like an average of 15 hours of semester of class credits to averaging over 40 per semester as a dental school student. Okay. So a huge change in content and detail, and you had to know it all. Right. So to process that, I had to try to simplify it for myself. That was my process. So I would take everything that I heard in class, I'd take what I read in the books, the slides that they gave us, and I condensed every test in dental school down to 5 pages of notebook paper, front and back. It started with 15 pages, and then I rewrote it and condensed it to 10. And then I rewrote it again and got it down to 5. Okay.
And you wrote smaller too, right?
Yeah, real small. That was my process. But by the end of it, you can imagine the cost of that was a lot of time, as my wife will tell you. But by the end of it, the benefit was I knew it.
You knew it.
Okay? Yep. I could literally every test picture what page of my notes the problem was.
Yeah.
So one of my classmates saw me doing well and came up and asked me to tutor him. Okay. And I was like, buddy, I don't know what to tell you. It's a lot of stuff. You got to know it.
Yeah.
I felt bad for him because I saw him putting the time in the library, hours every night, but not getting the result. So at the core, what it showed me was he couldn't tell what was important. His focus was scattered. Okay. So I just did the best way I could help him. I was like, I don't know how to tutor you, but let me do this. Let me give you a copy of my notes. So I made a copy of the 5 pages for him. I said, put your time into this and let's see how you do. He's like, that's it. I was like, that's what I do. Let's see how you do. So he went from an average of 68 to 72 per test. First test, he gets a 94.
Wow.
He's ecstatic, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And he thanked me. I was like, hey, my pleasure. I'm happy to help you. He said, can I have the next test? Sure. Let me make you a copy. I made him a copy. Next test, he got a 92. Okay. And he genuinely thanked me again. Of course, I was like, dude, yeah, I'm always willing to help people when I see put in the effort. Then he handed me $10 and said, thanks for the tutoring. And then he handed me another $10 and said, can I get the next test? And I'm like, oh, okay. So then he leaves and I tell my wife, I was like, honey, I just made $20 studying. She's like, you did? I was like, yeah. Woo-hoo. That was cool. Didn't think anything else about it. And then the next night, somebody knocks at my door at 9 p.m. and it's another one of my classmates. And he goes, hey, so I've been talking to our friend and I saw his results and I hear you got these notes. And he hands me $10 and says, I want a copy. So flash forward, basically the end result was I had over 65 members of my class on the payroll. Word had spread.
Isn't that interesting? No marketing dollars spent.
All word of mouth marketing. Okay? My first business.
That's awesome.
Paid, okay? Which was great because dental school was expensive. But it taught me 2 powerful lessons. Number one, that my colleagues were only going to put a certain amount of time, effort, and energy into the cause, whatever that cause was. Okay. That's why you had D students. That's why you had C students. Why you had B's and A. It was all time effort that they put into it. Okay. And focusing on the right thing being the third aspect of it.
Yeah.
So the top 10% hated me because I blew the curve out of the water.
Yeah.
So in essence, I would take D students and make them C's. Right. I'd take D's and they'd go to B's and I'd make B's A's because they were only going to put that time into whatever was in front of them. My notes just helped solidify the more detail, the most accurate detail for them to focus on. So I learned they were only going to put a certain amount of effort into it. The second thing I learned is when I solve a problem, as you said earlier, because I had to solve it for myself, that typically I solve the problem.
Yeah.
And it's not only for me, it works for others as well. And so then in my dental practices, when I solve these pain points on getting more new patients in the door and case acceptance and reactivating people who were lost, I realized my solution worked for myself and not only others. So that was the impetus of why I started building dental support companies to support my colleagues. I realized that they appreciate the fact that I had the answer and were willing to pay for me to be their shortcut and get the benefit and the results. So that was a lesson I learned in dental school that I just kept extrapolating in all of the businesses that I built. And it's one of the key features, like we were talking about at the airport, that I use if I'm going to take on any endeavor, like a couple of new projects I have coming up. That's where it all starts. Is this the problem I have solved, or do I need to dig into it and solve it first? And then can I build a company around it?
I also think you said something there when you were just talking about what's on a test. You had the ability to find out what's important. Some people don't have that, or they have it in a different category. I find also many times when I see relationships, I can zero in. That's my specialty, relationships and hard conversations. I can zero in just like a surgeon on what to do. But other people, there's too much information for them. I'm that with finances and things like that. My wife is great at it. So I give that stuff to her, and I get to deal with the hard conversations with contractors and things. So that's what we look at. When I talk to you, that's what I would suggest that I really saw. You could see something, go, oh, there's something I can do there. I don't think a lot of people don't think that way. They just see the problem. They don't think I can fix that. What, give us an example of how you created a business around that, or one you're looking at.
Yeah. So one of my first companies outside of my dental practices I built was a marketing call tracking company. So we track dental marketing as an unbiased tracking source. So meaning outside of advertisement agencies for offices in the US, Canada, the UK, and Australia, because I needed that for my own practices. I'm spending all this money on marketing. I have no idea what's working, what's not working, and why. And so all of the data was in these recorded phone calls from all these marketing sources, but I didn't have the time to listen to them and extrapolate the data. So I hired people to do that for me and give me reports. So I gave them the categories and then they brought me the data. And then with these reports, I was able to look for the patterns, right, and see the issues. So this was a great solution for offices. But what I kept hearing back from my clients is, it reminds me of an old adage that says, don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah, exactly.
Who tends to get shot when you bring bad news?
He's a messenger.
Messenger.
Yeah.
So they kept blaming me for their marketing troubles. And I'm like, dude, I didn't pay for that company. I didn't hire those team members to drop the ball on the phone. You did. I'm just telling you what the problem is. And then I give you some solutions to overcome it. They don't want to hear it. What I kept hearing from my market was, you know what? If your team just did it and took over the phones, we'd pay you for it.
There it is.
So problem, what was birthed out of that was my next business, and probably biggest and most popular, my dental call center.
Okay. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we took that over. We answer and schedule new patient calls for dental and medical practices around the US and Canada.
How many people work for that organization now?
Right now, we've got about, it's a small mom and pop group still. We've got about 36 agents on the phone. We handle probably over 500 clients across the US. We're a premium service, so to speak, but I made it a good deal for people because every call center you deal with, it costs you when the phone rings, no matter what, regardless of the outcome. What do they charge you by the minute? They all break it down in different ways, but in essence, you get paid no matter what when the phone rings. The way I built mine was it costs you nothing unless we make an appointment and they show.
Wow.
Now you're going to pay a premium for it,
Right.
but it only costs you when they show. To me, that's, but my team follows my phone training. They've all been trained in persuasion. So they understand how to close that call and influence that person to show. So for me, it's a calculated risk. So
yeah, absolutely.
But again, that was, again, the call center was built on that phone language and that persuasion training that I had to solve for my own team to handle my own marketing ineptitude.
Well, can I ask, is there anything you've got on the horizon that you could share with us? Or is there, I don't want to dive into any secrets you have, but I'd love to hear anything you can share with us.
Yeah. So obviously I'm passionate about this one project and that we talked about. So I get a call one day from my mom who was frantic because my grandmother, who was at a nursing home at the time, the nursing home lost her teeth. So my grandparents' generation, her and my grandfather both lost all of their teeth in their early 20s because they had gum disease. But back then they called it pyorrhea. They didn't know what gum disease was. All they knew was, even though there's no cavity in their mouth, teeth are getting loose and falling out. Okay. So they had all their teeth extracted, dentures put in their 20s. Now she's in close to, at this point, 80. And without teeth, you don't keep the bone in your jaws. So she lost almost all the bone in her lower jaw, right over two nerves, one on each side. So her dentures literally were pinching on that thing every time she'd eat. So there's nothing you could do to make that thing comfortable. So what she would do was she would just take her teeth out and gum it. Okay, it was less painful to her. So she'd wrap it in a napkin because she was embarrassed and then put it on her tray and not think about it. Okay, then the people come in, take her tray and throw everything away without looking at it. Next thing, no teeth. So my mom calls me and she's frantic because she can't leave the home. She's, what are we going to do? I was like, I'll take care of it. So I grabbed my lab person who made my teeth for me, my denture teeth, paid him for a day. And I said, hey, you're going to come with me, and we're not leaving that place till we make her a new set of teeth. So whatever you need, I'll cover it, but let's bring it. So we did. And while he was doing his thing, I was walking around interviewing people that live there. And come to find out, this is not the first time this has happened to others in that community. In fact, the majority I talked to had lost at least one set of teeth, if not multiple sets. Okay. So I realized it was an epidemic in this facility. And now I realize it's an epidemic that's worldwide. Okay. This is not a small problem.
Right.
It's happening with seniors and everybody in these kind of assisted and nursing living homes, okay, around the world. But here I am. I solved the problem. I'm happy. I pat myself on the back. I leave. I felt like I did a good thing for grandma. And not 2 weeks later, my mom calls me and says, you're not going to believe it. They lost him again. And I'm like, son of a, are you kidding me? Because with my lab guy, had we thought about it, he could have made a mold of the 2 teeth he made. And with that mold, made her a duplicate set, right? We didn't make a mold. And that's what I was kicking myself. So I realize now 2 problems. There was a significant problem that not only my grandmother had, but everybody has in these kind of facilities. And nobody's dealing with it. Nobody's taking this thing head on and doing something to solve this problem. And I solved it by making her a new set. And then had I made the mold, we could have made her a duplicate set forever.
Right.
And solved the problem once and for all. Unfortunately, because of my travel schedule and other things, my grandmother passed before I could get back to get her a new set of teeth. So I told myself in that moment, nobody should have to go through this again. I knew very clear what the solution was, but the technology really wasn't available for us to solve that. How do we get a true duplicate of what people are wearing today?
Right.
How do we efficiently store that duplicate? And then how do we manufacture an exact copy of what they've got, or what I like to call a backup denture? Okay. And then how do we get it to the people if they need it? Okay. Thankfully, technology is finally caught up. It's all here. We've got what we call intraoral scanners. I literally the other day took somebody's denture and with this magic wand called an intraoral scanner, scanned the entire thing and made a 3D duplicate of it in less than 90 seconds. Okay. True 3D duplicate that I can now store on HIPAA compliant servers with their personal information. And now I can charge facilities to do these scans in stores. And then if anybody needs a backup, we can 3D print an exact replica on demand.
And it's more efficient and cheaper all the way around for everyone involved.
More efficient and cheaper than everyone around.
Yeah. And for insurance companies, everyone. That is such a great idea.
Yeah.
And
so that's my new endeavor, backupdentures.com. You'll be seeing it. First, I'm starting in the nursing homes and assisted living because to me, I got to solve that problem for grandma and others like her. And then it'll expand probably to Walmarts, and then it'll be direct to consumer marketing. So
that's unbelievable. That's so good. Chris, I love your entrepreneurial spirit. I've learned so much from you and just the hours I've spent with you. I'm excited to work with you going forward and really appreciate you being on the show. You've taught us so much today, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rick.
Thanks. Everyone, thank you for being a part of the show today. And I'm going to bring Finley back in. Oh, there she is. That's her. I think she's moving around here. There she is. Thank you for listening today to Shot of Inspiration. And Chris, just thank you so much for being on the show. And everyone, I appreciate you being here. Be bold, be courageous, and respectfully speak your truth. Until next time, I'm Greg Stevens, got Finley. And if you like and subscribe, we really would appreciate it. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for listening to this episode of A Shot of Inspiration. If you like this or any of our other episodes, make sure you rate it and share it with a friend. This is Greg Stevens, and we look forward to being with you next time. Until then, be bold, be courageous, and respectfully speak your truth.